The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the 42nd floor like 1,000 tiny fists demanding attention. Emma Richardson didn't notice. She sat frozen at her desk, the glow from her iPhone illuminating her face in the darkened office, a face that had been flawless just hours ago, carefully composed for the morning's presentation. Now mascara traced dark rivers down her cheeks. Her hair had fallen loose from its professional bun, and her silk blouse bore the wrinkled evidence of hands that had gripped fabric too tightly, too many times. 11:47 p.m. The digital clock on her computer screen blinked the time mockingly. Everyone else had gone home hours ago, some to families, some to Friday night plans, some to apartments warmer than this sterile corporate space. Emma had stayed, telling herself she needed to finish the quarterly report. But the document sat untouched, the cursor blinking on a blank page like a heartbeat she couldn't feel anymore. Her phone screen lit up again. She didn't want to look, but her eyes betrayed her, drawn to the notification like a moth to a flame that had already burned her. Brad Morrison, relationship status changed to single. 43 people had already liked it. 43 people who knew, who probably pitied her, or worse, didn't think about her at all. Emma's laugh came out strangled, bitter. 3 years. 3 years of Sunday brunches in Brooklyn, of meeting his parents in Connecticut, of planning a future that included a brownstone and maybe, eventually, kids. 3 years reduced to a text message sent at 6:47 p.m. I'm done. Don't contact me again. No explanation, no conversation, just 14 words that detonated everything. The office around her felt cavernous. Sterling & Co. Marketing took up the entire floor, an open concept space that looked stunning in recruitment brochures, all glass partitions and ergonomic chairs and motivational quotes on Edison bulbs. During the day, it buzzed with phone calls and keyboard clicks and the hiss of the espresso machine. Now it was a graveyard of abandoned coffee cups and dark computer monitors, the only sound the building's HVAC system humming its monotonous tune. Emma had always loved staying late. It made her feel important, dedicated, like she was outworking everyone else climbing the same ladder. Tonight it just felt lonely. She opened Instagram, a mistake, she knew even as her thumb moved, and there he was. Brad at the whiskey room in Midtown, arms slung over Tyler's shoulders, both of them grinning at the camera with drinks raised. Posted 20 minutes ago. The caption, "Kings don't mourn, they move forward." Her stomach twisted. She'd been crying in an empty office while he'd been laughing with their friends. Correction, his friends. They'd always been his friends first. She'd just been Brad's girlfriend, tolerated at group dinners, always slightly outside the inside jokes. A fresh wave of tears came, and this time Emma didn't fight it. She buried her face in her hands, shoulders shaking, and let out the kind of sob that comes from somewhere deep in the chest. The kind you can only release when you're absolutely certain no one is watching. Except someone was. Marcus Wells had learned to move quietly. 3 years of night shifts had taught him that people didn't really see janitors. They saw the uniform, maybe noticed a trash can being emptied, but never the person behind the task. It was a strange kind of invisibility, being present but unnoticed, like background music in an elevator. Tonight, he'd started on the 44th floor and was working his way down, following the same route he'd followed for 1,000 nights. Empty trash cans, vacuum high-traffic areas, disinfect break room surfaces, check bathroom supplies. The routine was meditative, gave him time to think, to listen to the podcasts and audiobooks that made the hours pass faster. But tonight, as the elevator doors opened on 42, he pulled out his earbuds. Something felt different. The lights were still on in the northeast corner, unusual for this hour. Marcus pushed his cleaning cart forward, the wheels squeaking softly on the polished floor, and that's when he saw her, a woman sitting at a desk near the windows, hunched over, shoulders trembling. Even from across the floor he could hear it, that particular sound of someone trying to cry quietly and failing. Marcus stopped, his hand resting on the cart handle. Every instinct told him to turn around, to come back later, to give her privacy. In 3 years he'd learned the unspoken rules. Don't interrupt. Don't engage unless absolutely necessary. Stay invisible. But something about the scene stopped him. Maybe it was the way the city lights behind her made her look impossibly small. Maybe it was the memory of his own late nights last year, sitting in his sister's apartment after Danielle left, feeling like the world had caved in. Maybe it was just that she looked so utterly alone. He stood there for 30 seconds, debating. The woman, young, maybe late 20s, wearing the kind of clothes that cost more than his weekly paycheck, didn't seem to notice him. Her phone lay face up on the desk, screen glowing, and even from here Marcus could see the photos, the texts, the digital evidence of whatever had broken her. Just do your job, he told himself. Clean the floor and leave. But his feet moved forward instead. Marcus cleared his throat softly when he was about 10 feet away, not wanting to startle her. Evening, miss. Her head snapped up, eyes wide and red-rimmed, mascara smudged like war paint. For a second, she just stared at him, this stranger in a gray uniform with a cart full of cleaning supplies, and Marcus saw the exact moment she remembered where she was, who she was supposed to be. I'm fine, she said quickly, voice hoarse. Her hands moved frantically, trying to wipe her face with her palms. Just working late. Marcus glanced at her laptop. The screen was dark, had been for a while based on the lack of glow. No papers spread out, no files open, just a phone clutched in her hand and tears that said this wasn't about work at all. Right, he said quietly. He shouldn't push, shouldn't cross that line. But something in her eyes, that desperate attempt to hold it together in front of someone she probably considered below her notice, made his heart ache. He reached into the pocket of his cart where he kept personal supplies, a travel pack of tissues, the kind his mom always made sure he carried. Here, Marcus said, stepping closer and setting them on her desk. You look like you might need these more than I do. Emma stared at the tissues like they were a foreign object. This man, this janitor, was offering her kindness, and somehow that made everything worse. Because Brad hadn't been kind. Brad had been cruel in his efficiency, ending 3 years via text like he was canceling a subscription service. Thank you, she whispered, taking the packet with shaking hands. The simple gesture broke something inside her, and fresh tears spilled over. Marcus took a small step back, giving her space but not leaving. He pulled a microfiber cloth from his cart and pretended to wipe down a nearby desk, staying within earshot but not hovering. It was a respectful distance, Emma realized. He was letting her cry without making her feel watched. She pulled out a tissue and pressed it to her eyes, mascara staining the white paper black. I'm sorry, she said, though she wasn't sure why she was apologizing. I'm not usually this. This what? Marcus asked, his voice gentle. Human? The word hit her unexpectedly. Human. When was the last time someone had acknowledged that? At Sterling & Co., showing emotion was weakness. You powered through breakups, family emergencies, exhaustion. You wore your stress like a badge of honor, and your vulnerability like shame. My boyfriend, Emma started, then stopped. Ex-boyfriend. As of tonight, he just ended it. 3 years, over text. Marcus stopped pretending to clean. He turned to look at her, really look at her, and his expression held something Emma hadn't expected. Recognition. Not pity, not discomfort, just the quiet understanding of someone who'd been there. That's rough, he said simply. I'm sorry. Emma laughed, but it came out broken. The worst part? We work together. Same company, different departments. I'm going to have to see him every day. Watch him move on, probably with someone from accounting or sales. Everyone will know. Everyone will. Her voice cracked. The phone on her desk buzzed again, and without thinking, she looked. Instagram notification. Brad Morrison tagged you in a photo. Her hands trembled as she opened it. It was from 2 months ago, a picture of them at a company retreat in the Hamptons, both smiling, his arm around her waist. Brad had added a caption, officially closing this chapter. No hard feelings. Moving forward. New beginnings. The comments were already rolling in. Supportive messages for Brad. Questions about what happened. Nobody had messaged her directly. Emma felt the air leave her lungs. He'd made it public. Their entire relationship, their breakup, her pain, all of it now entertainment for acquaintances and strangers. He tagged me, she whispered, staring at the screen. He actually tagged me in the breakup announcement. Marcus didn't know what that meant exactly. Social media wasn't really his thing, but he understood the tone. Public humiliation dressed up as moving forward. Without overthinking it, he pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. It was a breach of protocol, probably crossing a line he shouldn't cross. Janitors didn't sit with executives, but right now, he wasn't a janitor, and she wasn't an executive. They were just 2 people on an empty floor at midnight, and one of them was drowning. Want to know what my ex said when she left? Marcus asked. Emma looked up, surprised that he'd sat down, surprised he was sharing. She told me I'd never amount to anything more than this. He gestured to his gray uniform, the cleaning cart, the visible evidence of a job most people looked through rather than at. Said she couldn't build a future with someone who had no ambition. That's horrible, Emma said softly. Marcus shrugged. It hurt. Still does sometimes. But you know what hurt more? That I almost believed her. Almost let her define what ambition looked like, what success meant. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his dark eyes steady and kind. I've cleaned these offices for 3 years. You know what I've learned? I've seen people stay late for ambition, chasing promotions, building empires, climbing ladders. And I've seen people stay late because they're avoiding going home. Because work is easier than whatever's waiting for them outside these walls. Emma felt exposed, like he'd reached into her chest and pulled out a truth she hadn't wanted to admit. You're the first person I've ever seen cry like the world ended, Marcus continued quietly. And I just want you to know, whatever that guy did, however he made you feel, it's not because you weren't enough. Sometimes people leave because they're too small to appreciate what they have. Silence settled between them, broken only by the rain against the windows and the distant hum of the city 42 floors below. Emma looked at this man, this stranger in a janitor's uniform who'd shown her more compassion in 10 minutes than Brad had in the last 6 months, and felt something shift. I don't even know your name, she said. Marcus. Marcus Wells. Emma Richardson. She extended her hand, formal and absurd given the circumstances, but Marcus shook it anyway, his grip warm and solid. Nice to meet you, Emma Richardson. Even if the circumstances could be better. A real smile touched her lips, small but genuine. Yeah, could definitely be better. Marcus stood, picking up his cloth and returning to the cart. I should let you, well, I'd say get back to work, but he gestured at her blank laptop screen. Yeah, Emma admitted. I'm not actually working. Figured. He started to push the cart away, then paused, pulled a small notepad from his pocket, the kind he used to track which floors needed supplies, and tore off a piece of paper. He wrote quickly, then hesitated before placing it on her desk next to the tissues. If you need someone to talk to at 3 a.m. when the world feels too quiet, Marcus said, meeting her eyes. No judgment, no strings, just someone who gets it. Emma looked down at the paper, a phone number, and a name. Marcus. Why? She asked. You don't even know me. Marcus smiled, sad and knowing. Maybe that's exactly why. Sometimes strangers can hold our pain better than the people who think they know us. He walked away then, pushing his cart toward the elevator, the squeak of wheels fading into the ambient noise of the building. Emma sat alone again, but the office felt different now, less like a tomb and more like a space where something unexpected had happened. She picked up the piece of paper, ran her thumb over the handwritten numbers. Her phone sat beside it, Brad's Instagram post still glowing on the screen. 2 choices, one representing her past, her pain, her public humiliation, the other representing, what? A stranger's kindness? A moment of human connection? Emma carefully folded the paper and slipped it into her wallet, right in front of her credit cards where she'd see it every time she opened it. Outside, the rain continued to fall on Manhattan, washing the streets clean, blurring the lights into watercolor smudges. Inside, Emma Richardson sat at her desk on the 42nd floor, no longer crying, holding a stranger's phone number like a lifeline. And for the first time since 6:47 p.m., she felt like maybe, possibly, she might survive this. The clock blinked, 12:23 a.m. Emma shut down her laptop, gathered her things, and rode the elevator down to street level. The lobby was empty except for the night security guard who nodded at her without really seeing her. She stepped out into the November rain, let it wash the remaining mascara from her face, and walked toward the subway. In her wallet, Marcus's number waited. In her phone, Brad's world moved on without her. But for the first time, Emma wondered if maybe that wasn't the tragedy she'd thought it was. Maybe it was just the end of one chapter and the quiet beginning of another. Emma's apartment in the Upper West Side was exactly what a successful marketing executive's home should be. Hardwood floors, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the street below, minimalist furniture in shades of gray and white, abstract art that cost more than it meant. It looked like a photo from Architectural Digest, beautiful, cold, perfect. She hated it tonight. 2:47 a.m. Emma lay in her king-sized bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the city sounds filtering through the double-paned windows. Somewhere below, a taxi honked. A siren wailed in the distance. New York never slept, which meant she wasn't alone in her insomnia, even if it felt that way. Her phone sat on the nightstand, screen dark. She'd checked it 47 times since getting home. Brad hadn't texted. Of course he hadn't. He'd made it clear they were done. But her brain kept hoping, kept imagining the apology that would never come. Instead, there were messages from her best friend Jessica. Saw the Instagram post. Are you okay? Call me. From her mom in Ohio. Honey, what happened with Brad? From coworkers who probably just wanted the gossip. Hey, just checking in. Emma had responded to none of them. What could she say? That she'd built her entire adult identity around being Brad Morrison's girlfriend, Sterling and Co. As rising star? The woman who had it all together? That it had all been a carefully constructed facade that crumbled the moment real adversity hit? She rolled over, pulling the duvet up to her chin. The apartment's silence pressed against her ears, oppressive and complete. She thought about Marcus's words. If you need someone to talk to at 3 a.m. when the world feels too quiet. Her wallet sat on the dresser across the room. The piece of paper was still there, she knew, tucked in front of her Amex. A stranger's phone number. A lifeline offered without expectations. Don't be pathetic, she told herself. You don't even know him. He was just being nice. But at 2:58 a.m., Emma got out of bed, retrieved her wallet, and stared at Marcus's handwriting in the dim light from the street. His numbers were neat, careful, the kind of penmanship that suggested someone who took his time with things. At 3:03 a.m., she typed out a message, deleted it, typed it again. Emma. Hi. It's Emma from the 42nd floor. You said 3 a.m. I couldn't sleep. She hit send before she could overthink it, then immediately regretted it. He was probably asleep. Probably thought she was crazy for actually texting. Probably. Her phone buzzed. Marcus. Hey, I'm awake. Couldn't sleep either. Marcus. Want to talk about it or just talk about anything else? Emma felt something in her chest loosen. He wasn't judging her for reaching out. Wasn't making her explain or justify. Emma. Anything else? Please. Marcus. Okay. Question. What's your opinion on pineapple on pizza? Emma laughed. Actually laughed for the first time in hours. It was such an absurd, normal question. No therapy speak, no forced positivity, just a ridiculous debate about food. Emma. Absolutely not. That's a crime against Italian cuisine. Marcus. Wrong answer. Pineapple belongs on pizza. Sweet and savory is a gift to humanity. Emma. We can't be friends. This is a deal breaker. Marcus. Too late. You already texted me at 3 a.m. That's friendship contract signed and sealed. They texted for an hour. About favorite movies. Emma loved old romantic comedies she'd never admit to in professional settings. Marcus was into sci-fi and Christopher Nolan films. About the worst coffee in Manhattan, Marcus had a surprisingly detailed list. About the view from the 42nd floor, which Marcus cleaned but had never really looked at, he admitted. At 4:17 a.m., the conversation shifted. Marcus, can I ask what you're really not sleeping about? Emma, everything. How I have to face the office Monday. How everyone knows. How I wasted 3 years on someone who ended it via text. Marcus, you didn't waste anything. You learned who he was. That's valuable information. Emma, expensive lesson. Marcus, the important ones usually are. Emma stared at those words, feeling tears prick her eyes again, but different this time. Not the devastating sobs from the office, but something quieter, more like release. Emma, thank you. For the tissues. For this. For not making me feel stupid. Marcus, you're not stupid. You're hurt. There's a difference. Emma, are you always this wise at 4 a.m.? Marcus, only on Fridays. Rest of the week I'm a disaster. At 4:52 a.m., Emma finally felt sleep pulling at her. Emma, I should try to sleep. Thank you, Marcus, really. Marcus, anytime. And Emma, tomorrow will be slightly less terrible than today, and the day after slightly less than that. It gets better in increments. Emma, from experience? Marcus, from experience. Emma fell asleep with her phone still in her hand, the chat window open, and for the first time since 6:47 p.m. the previous evening, she felt like maybe she could breathe. Saturday afternoon, Emma woke up at 1 p.m., something she never did. She was a 6 a.m. person, a morning runner, a conqueror of days. Sleeping past noon felt like failure. But when she checked her phone, there was a text from Marcus, sent at 11:30 a.m. Marcus, morning. How did you sleep? Emma, better than expected. Just woke up, actually. Marcus. Good. You needed it. Marcus. Random question. You free tonight? I know this diner in Hell's Kitchen. Makes the best coffee in the city. Doesn't look like much, but trust me. Emma stared at the message. He was asking her to meet. In person. This wasn't just late-night texting anymore. This was real. Every logical part of her brain listed the reasons to say no. She didn't know him. They came from completely different worlds. Her life was already complicated enough. People might see them. Emma. What time? Marcus. 6:30? It's called Sal's. Corner of 47th and 9th. Emma. I'll be there. At 6:15 p.m., Emma stood outside Sal's diner, second-guessing everything. The place looked exactly like Marcus described. Worn down with a flickering neon sign and windows that needed cleaning. Through the glass, she could see red vinyl booths, a long counter with spinning stools, and walls covered in vintage photographs of New York. It was the opposite of every carefully curated restaurant Brad had taken her to. Those places with tasting menus and wine pairings and servers who described each microgreen on your plate. She almost left, almost texted an excuse. But then the door opened and Marcus stepped out, and Emma barely recognized him. No gray uniform, just dark jeans, a plain navy hoodie, and a jacket that had seen better days. His hair wasn't hidden under a cap. He looked younger somehow, less invisible, and when he smiled at her, it reached his eyes in a way that made her stomach flip. You came, he said, sounding genuinely surprised. I said I would. People say a lot of things at 3 a.m. they don't mean at 6:30 p.m. Emma smiled. Fair point. But I meant it. They went inside. The diner smelled like coffee and frying bacon and something cinnamon sweet. An older waitress with gray hair and a name tag reading Dolores waved at Marcus like he was a regular. Your usual spot? She called out. Yeah, thanks, Dolores. They slid into a corner booth, vinyl squeaking under them. Emma felt absurdly out of place in her expensive coat and designer boots, but Marcus didn't seem to notice or care. So, Emma said, wrapping her hands around the coffee mug Dolores had filled without asking. Best coffee in the city? Taste it first, judge later. She did. It was strong, slightly bitter, perfect. Nothing fancy, no oat milk or vanilla syrup or Instagram-worthy latte art. Just good coffee. Okay, Emma admitted. You weren't lying. They talked for 3 hours. About everything and nothing. Marcus told her about growing up in the Bronx, his mom who worked 2 jobs, his younger sister who was in nursing school, about how he'd started cleaning offices to pay bills while taking online business courses at night, working toward a degree 1 class at a time. It's slow, he said, shrugging. But it's mine, you know. Nobody can take it from me. Emma told him about Ohio, about being the first in her family to graduate college, about the pressure to prove she belonged in rooms full of people who'd summered in the Hamptons since childhood. I built this whole persona, she confessed. The right clothes, the right boyfriend, the right everything. And when Brad left, it all just collapsed, because none of it was real. Marcus leaned back in the booth, studying her. Maybe the collapse was the real part. Maybe that's where you actually start building. Around them, the diner filled and emptied. Families came for early dinner. Late shift workers grabbed coffee before heading to overnight jobs. A couple of teenagers occupied the counter, laughing too loud over milkshakes. Dolores refilled their cups 4 times and never rushed them. At 9:30 p.m., Marcus's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, frowned slightly. I have to head out, he said apologetically. Night shift starts at 10. You work Saturday nights? 5 nights a week, Tuesday through Saturday. Emma felt a strange pang. While she'd been sleeping in, recovering from heartbreak in her expensive apartment, Marcus had been working. While she'd be home tomorrow, maybe brunching with Jessica or binge-watching Netflix, Marcus would be cleaning offices. Different worlds, she thought again. But maybe that didn't matter as much as she'd thought. Same time next week? Marcus asked as they stood outside the diner, November wind cutting through the street. Yeah, Emma said. I'd like that. He smiled, that genuine smile that made her feel seen, and walked toward the subway entrance. Emma watched him disappear down the steps, then headed in the opposite direction toward her apartment. Her phone buzzed. Marcus, thanks for coming. You made a long shift feel less long before it even started. Emma, thank you for the best coffee in the city. You were right about that. Marcus, I'm always right. You'll learn. Emma smiled at her screen, feeling something she hadn't felt in a long time. Anticipation for what came next. Monday morning hit like cold water. Emma walked into Sterling & Co. at 8:47 a.m., coffee in hand, armor back in place, hair perfect, makeup flawless, posture confident. The elevator doors opened on the 42nd floor, and there he was, Brad Morrison, looking annoyingly put together in a charcoal suit, laughing with Jennifer from sales. His hand rested on her lower back, casual, possessive, a gesture Emma knew intimately. Their eyes met. Brad's smile didn't falter, but something flickered in his expression. Satisfaction, maybe, or relief that she wasn't making a scene. "Emma," he said, tone professionally pleasant. "How was your weekend?" "Fine." Her voice came out steady. "Thank God. Yours?" "Great, actually. Really great." Jennifer looked uncomfortable, probably sensing the tension. The elevator doors started to close and Emma stepped out, forcing herself not to rush, not to show anything. She made it to her desk before her hands started shaking. At 11 a.m. during a team meeting, Brad presented a campaign he'd been working on, a campaign Emma had helped conceptualize before the breakup. He didn't mention her contribution once. At 1 p.m., Emma saw Marcus emptying trash cans on the executive floor. He looked up, caught her eye, and gave a small smile. Just a flicker of recognition, nothing inappropriate. It made her feel less alone. At 1:07 p.m., her colleague Rachel appeared at her desk. "So," Rachel said, tone dripping with false concern. "How are you holding up? We all saw Brad's post." "I'm fine." It must be so awkward seeing him with Jennifer already. Emma's jaw tightened. "Is there something work-related you needed, Rachel?" Rachel held up her hands. "Just checking on you. Also, I noticed you smiling at the janitor earlier. You know him?" The question was casual, but Emma heard the real question underneath. "Why would you know the janitor?" "He's friendly," Emma said carefully. Rachel's eyes gleamed with curiosity. "Well, if you need to talk, I'm here." She wasn't. None of them were. They wanted drama, gossip, something to discuss in the break room. After Rachel left, Emma found herself watching Marcus work across the floor. He moved efficiently, methodically, invisible to everyone except her, and she realized with creeping dread that she cared what people thought about him seeing her acknowledge him. That shame twisted in her gut, ugly and real. That evening, Emma texted Marcus. "Emma, can we meet? Tonight, if possible." Marcus, "Everything okay?" Emma, "I need to talk to you. In person." They met at Riverside Park at 8 p.m. on a bench overlooking the Hudson. The November night was bitter cold, the kind that cut through coats and settled in bones. Across the water, New Jersey's lights twinkled like distant stars. "I was embarrassed today," Emma said without preamble. "A colleague saw me acknowledge you at work, and I got defensive, like I'd been caught doing something wrong." Marcus sat quietly, letting her continue. "I've spent years building this image, and I was afraid," her voice cracked, "I was afraid you'd ruin it. That people would judge me for knowing someone who cleans offices instead of running them. And that makes you feel like a terrible person," Marcus said gently. "Yes. Emma, look at me." She did. His eyes were understanding, but also firm. "I'm not here to crack your image or prove anything to your coworkers," he said. "I'm just here, but I'm also not going to be someone's secret or someone's rebellion against their ex. I deserve better than that." "I know," Emma whispered. "You do. So the question is, what do you want? Not what your office expects, not what makes the best story. What do you actually want?" Emma looked out at the water, at the city lights reflecting on dark waves. She thought about Brad, about 3 years of performing the right kind of love for someone who'd discarded her via text. She thought about Rachel's knowing smile, about the judgment she'd face, and she thought about Marcus, who'd offered her tissues and kindness when she was at her lowest, who talked to her at 3 a.m. about pineapple pizza, who saw her, really saw her, without needing her to be anything other than honest. "I want," Emma said slowly, "to stop being afraid of what people think. I want to choose someone who makes me feel human instead of perfect." Marcus reached over, took her hand. His palm was warm against her cold fingers. "Then choose that," he said. "But be sure, because halfway won't work for either of us." Emma squeezed his hand, certain for the first time in days. "I'm choosing this. I'm choosing you." 3 weeks later, Emma Richardson walked through the Sterling & Kerber lobby at 10:47 p.m. on a Thursday. She wasn't there to work. She was there to meet Marcus after his shift. She waited near the security desk, visible to anyone passing by, not hiding. When the elevator doors opened and Marcus emerged in his gray uniform, pushing his cart, she smiled. "Hey," she said, walking toward him with 2 coffees from the lobby cafe. Expensive, pretentious coffee that cost $8 a cup. "Hey, yourself." He took the offered cup, eyebrows raised. "This is fancy. Thought I'd return the favor, though Sal's is still better." Obviously, they walked out together into the November night. Behind them, 2 junior associates stopped and stared. Emma didn't look back. On the street, surrounded by taxi horns and pedestrian chatter and the endless pulse of New York, Marcus asked, "How was work? Brad pitched another campaign today. Didn't credit my ideas again. You going to do something about it?" "Already did. Talked to my supervisor. Filed a formal complaint." Marcus grinned. "Look at you, standing up for yourself. Learning from the best." They walked toward the subway, shoulders occasionally bumping, comfortable in the silence between words. Emma's phone buzzed. Probably Jessica, wanting details about the janitor situation, as she called it. Emma ignored it. Above them, the city stretched endlessly upward, millions of lit windows holding millions of stories. Emma thought about how just a month ago she'd been crying on the 42nd floor, believing her life was over. Now, walking beside Marcus Wells toward the 1 train, she realized it hadn't ended. It had just finally started. "Hey, Marcus." "Yeah? Thank you, for the tissues. For everything." He smiled, that smile that had changed everything. "Anytime, Emma Richardson. Anytime." And in the heart of Manhattan, on a cold Thursday night, 2 people from different worlds chose each other, not because it was easy, or expected, or perfect, but because it was real.